Okay, any questions? So that gives you one example, one case study. We'll do another case study next time.
Can you just explain the communist president?
Yeah.
Can you just explain?
Must I explain the communist?
Yeah.
You after the okay. The in 1917, Russia undergoes a revolution under the leadership of V.I. Lenin. Okay, the Soviet Union is established, and in the Second World War, this communist state of Russia was had a history, firstly checking out what was going to happen with Hitler. Okay. Ultimately, Hitler attacked Russia. Okay, Hitler attacked Russia, and Russia nearly was defeated. There's the famous Battle of Stalingrad, and the Soviet Union nearly came to an end. And at the last moment, they managed to push in the winter. Was it 43? I don't know. They pushed back the Nazis, and there was an alliance between the Soviets and the non-Nazi parties, the British and the French and the Americans. Okay. At the end of the Second World War, with the defeat of the Nazis, 1945, the Russians take part of Eastern Europe and part of Berlin, and they're still communist, but they defeated a common enemy, the Nazis. And now, what's happening in the rest of the world? The colonial world, Africa, Asia. India was still under British rule. There were, other parts of Asia, Malaysia, and all these. So, in the meanwhile, in these territories, these movements that I'm talking about, nationalist movements, ethnic movements, they were militating against illegitimate rule. This rule, you have been telling us about fighting Nazism, which were racist and illegitimate, blah, blah, blah. How come we're not getting the benefits? We fought with you people. We fought against the Nazis. Why aren't we there are all these arguments. The people in the colonies are reading about it in the papers. You must go and read about this in the paper, in the archives. They're reading about what's happening. And they're making demands then. But there is the fear on the side of the British in their colonies that these nationalist movements actually, if they're not at this point communist, they will become communist. And we will lose them from the Western sphere of influence. And they will be which means many things. It's not simply an idea. It's about trade. You see, it's about trade relations. It's about who we're going to get our raw materials from. Will they remain open as a market for our goods? So it's all, a lot of politics is about what will happen in the future. A lot of international politics is about, if we don't do this now, what's going to happen in a couple of years' time? And in terms of markets and so on. Either markets from which we can get raw materials or whatever, or from which to which we can import goods, and our companies. So there are many companies, British companies, massive monopolies, companies like Unilever, that were operating in the colonies, and they were big taxpayers to the British. If they're going to lose their influence here, British influence will be lost. There'll be less tax to pay to the British government and so on. So there's this fear of communism, but in Africa, the communist parties are actually not all that powerful. That the path to freedom from colonial rule was not through communist mobilization. The problem in Africa from a classical communist point of view was the question of a working class. We had very small working class here in our cities. You know, the classical theory that it must be led by the working class. Well, what do you do in a continent and a country where most of the people are on the land? So that's why after the Second World War and later on, the ideas of Mao becomes very significant here. So Maoist thought begins to influence people like ZANU-PF, people in the PAC. You need to learn some history, some global history of the Chinese Revolution and what happens in China. And there's an interest now, and then there's competition between the communists in Russia and in China. There's competition that develops after the Second World War, and there are parties here that take up a Maoist path because they see the Chinese model, because China is a country, agricultural country, that we can import that Chinese model here. And there are all sorts of debates on the left amongst communists and socialists with regard to the nature of relations on the land in Africa. Are they peasants? What is a peasant? And so on. And there are experiments then after independence with regard to communal land ownership and so on. This just happens in Tanzania under who's the ruler there in from independence? Who's the ruler of Nyerere? And he has this model of the Ujamaa villages, which you can read about again.